Back live with you tonight and in focus, and thanks for staying on. EFF leader Julius Malema has claimed success for his party's bid to shut down the country in protest against President Cyril Ramaphosa's government and the energy crisis in the country. Let's take this conversation further now with reaction from political parties. Ganief, Hendricks, leader of Jama-ah, Canaan, Mdletshe from the National Freedom Party. He's the Secretary General. Zama-ah, a spokesperson of we are actually joined by Mr. Zungula himself for the African Transformation Movement, and Wayne Thring, Deputy President of the African Christian Democratic Party. Gentlemen, good evening. Good to have you, and thank you very much for your time. From my sense and what I have read so far, it's 4 of you. 3 of you were not part of the action as far as the march is concerned. One organization, which is the ATM, was right there as part of the organization, while the other 3 of you were in support of the right to protest. There were some reservations that you held about the events of today. Let's start with the NFP. The NFP said they are calling on law enforcement agencies to uphold the rule of law. Sheikh Imam saying they will not be a part of a publicity stunt. However, they do support protecting the rights of all citizens and ensuring that their voices are heard. How would you characterize the events of today? Babu Mdletshe, good evening.
Good evening, Thabo, and the viewers at home as well as my colleagues. First and foremost, as National Freedom Party, we must say that we are not in a position at this current moment to say whether the national shutdown was a success or not. Safe to say that we support. We are in fact in favor of the issues that the EFF was raising today, because we share the same sentiments that something has to be done. The president has to step down. But in general, we are saying the National Freedom Party is concerned about the economic effect the national shutdown has today, because the reality is the hawkers and the people who are selling on the streets could not do that today. It means there are families who are going to go to bed on empty stomachs today because of this national shutdown. Therefore, we are saying, while we share the same sentiments and we support some of the views expressed by EFF, we are not happy with the manner in which the entire national shutdown went through. As we are saying that the hawkers and those who are relying solely on selling could not make any money today. It means that there are kids that as we speak, that have not having an opportunity to eat anything simply because today it was not a normal Monday. Therefore, the National Freedom Party says, while we support the stand of the EFF, but we are not happy with the manner in which they carried out the national shutdown and the effect, the economic effect on this strike going forward.
Ganief, Hendricks, leader of Jama-ah, you are taking a rather cautious approach, I suppose, in your statement as far as the shutdown is concerned. However, you are emphasizing this call for a revolution that is akin to a revolution that led up to CODESA. And you're saying July unrest maybe could have been such a revolution, not necessarily in support of the destruction and the violence and the chaos that went on there. But you are taking a more cautious approach because you're not sure whether the shutdown actually serves to pursue the objectives of a revolution. How do you characterize the events of today?
Yeah, let me first of all congratulate the Commander-in-Chief of the EFF. I think they've largely succeeded. As you know, we are now on level 1. I think it's the first time that we've been on level 1 this year. So that's a major achievement. And secondly, that the Minister of Electricity went to visit some of the power stations that President Ramaphosa said is controlled by a criminal syndicate. So we imagine that using these emergency powers, you will dismantle the criminal syndicate, which the President confided in political party leaders, exists at every power station in the country. Just looking at that, the action today was a success. We saw many EFF leaders doing their best endeavors to reduce tensions, violence. And I think the EFF must be congratulated for keeping their word. But coming back to the revolution, yes, Jama-ah has always been of the position that CODESA captured the revolution that led to the changes in South Africa, and that the CODESA has failed. I don't say the Constitution has failed, but the structures in the Constitution has failed, like the Section 9 committee. They've all failed the country. The parliament, 6 parliaments have failed the country. They haven't done proper oversight. So we find that many people feel that we need to continue the revolution that led to CODESA. So we looked at the July 21 unrest to find out whether that is part of that same revolution that led to the CODESA negotiations. And initially we thought so until that was captured in inverted commas. I don't know if Lenin and Marx will now agree with me that that's also a capture. But the looters then captured that particular event. So now you're quite right to say that political parties are cautious. Now Jama-ah was cautious. We played a very active oversight role. That's why we're reporting on a very successful action by the EFF. But we also noticed that there's a broad church that's actually supporting the action today. And they may have been part of the planning and decided that let us use the EFF name. But it's actually a broad church. And some of the broad church members were part of the July looting. They didn't expect looting. I think they just expected some reaction from the people in South Africa to show the government that things must change. And that hasn't helped because nothing really has changed much. So yes, Jama-ah feels that leading up to the 224 elections, the revolution that led to CODESA will also lead to the outcome of the 224 elections. But it won't be violent, it will be through the ballot box.
All right. Dr. Zungula, I'm going to give the 3 parties that did not take part. I know you were out in the sun, and then I'll give you a chance to respond after having heard what all 3 of them have had to say. So, Mr. Thring, let's bring you into the conversation. Putting aside your sentiments, particularly around the apology that you're asking the EFF to forward around the utterances on the lead up to this shutdown. Your view is that of you support the call for change. You've been calling for the president to take accountability for Phala Phala. You support the cleanup at Eskom, administratively, managerially, and otherwise. You see the challenges of unemployment. You see the challenges of a high cost of living, crime, and gender-based violence. However, you don't agree that the method proposed of a national shutdown was the correct one. How do you characterize events of today?
Well, absolutely. I think the African Christian Democratic Party currently has the 6th largest political party in the national parliament has been quite clear in terms of its position. You've already indicated the position of the ACDP, calling for not just for Ramaphosa to be held to account, but even during the period of the state capture and the Nkandla scandal, the ACDP, together with all of the major opposition parties, called for the president then, Mr. Jacob Zuma, also to be held to account. So it's no different for us. The position of the ACDP is a position of principle. If we feel that there are constitutional infringements that have incurred, then the president is not above the law. The president must be held to account. And so the ACDP has been very clear in terms of holding the current president, Mr. Ramaphosa, to account, and we will continue to insist and support, give our support for that particular cause for Mr. Ramaphosa to be held accountable. I think that in terms of the call for clean administration, to clean up at Eskom, to get rid of crime and corruption at Eskom, the ACDP too, from way back, has been a part of the state capture investigations into corruption at Eskom, and we continue to voice our opposition to the travesty that has taken place at Eskom, which has plunged the country not only into darkness but also to the brink of economic collapse. And it is for this particular reason that the ACDP does not and did not support the method of the EFF in calling for a calling for a national shutdown. Recall that we have some of the highest unemployment rates in the world. Recall that our debt to GDP sits at over 70%. We've also just seen a GDP contraction in the fourth quarter. We have the IMF indicating that we're going to see some of the highest unemployment levels next year or later this year ever. And so all of the economic indicators, we've got the grey listing that has taken place because of our inability to deal with illicit financial flows in and out of the country. So we have all of these challenges, many of South Africans languishing. We have some of the highest poverty index. 25% of South Africans go to bed hungry. We have some 30 million South Africans that are languishing in poverty. And so we felt that this particular method only would rub salt into the wound of many South Africans, because what we possibly could see now is those businesses that were on the brink actually closing. Those who are, like we heard earlier, the mothers and the fathers who are struggling to make ends meet, who are selling some mealies on the corner, or some peanuts or so on the corner, now also without an income for a day. And so it is for that reason, as the ACDP, we see South Africans coming together to build our economy. We see South Africans coming together to create jobs. We see South Africa as a place where families thrive, a place where it is safe for mums and dads to raise children, a place where you can send your children to school without scratching your head about whether they're going to be stabbed or shot in the streets. And this is the kind of South Africa that the ACDP wishes to build. Yeah. And so when we use intimidation, that if you don't shut your business, you may be looted, we're not going to be responsible for burning and so on. That kind of intimidation politics is not necessary for the South Africa in which we currently living. We want to see a South Africa that thrives economically, a South Africa where people are safe, a South Africa where families are safe. Right. And this is the position of the ACDP.
Back live tonight and in focus, and thanks for staying on. A lot has been said about the degree in which there is tolerance for dissent. Some have been talking, of course, about the resources that have been spent, and we have also been talking about the deployment of the forces and how they carry themselves. We'll explore all those issues, but as a way of coming in, still with the ATM, the NFP, the ACDP, and Jama-ah. Dr. Zungula, good evening. Thank you very much for your time. You took part and you were on the front lines along with SAFTU that I saw, along with PAC that I saw, along with the RET forces, and maybe some other parties that were not necessarily wearing their colors. You added your voice to this particular campaign. Why do you think your voice was a worthy addition to this campaign, and how do you feel about all these other parties that, although they would support your initiative, did not become a part of the campaign today?
Evening, Thabo. Look, if you are talking about the state of our country under the leadership of Mr. Ramaphosa, when he came in as president in 2018, the rand was sitting to the dollar was sitting below 14 rands. Now it is above 19 rands. If you're to look at the crime levels, 47 people were killed on a daily basis. Now we're talking about 80 people. The unemployment rate has increased from 25% to 35%. And the debt to GDP, back then it was under 50%. Now it is hovering above 60%. Now that on its own is the clearest indication that Mr. Ramaphosa has indeed failed to lead South Africa to prosperity. Therefore, it cannot be business as usual. Like my colleague has said, more than 20 million South Africans go to bed hungry each and every day. More than 30 million South Africans are classified as South Africans that are living in poverty, meaning they're living under 1,000 rands a month. Now, it is for that reason where we as the ATM, we felt that we needed to take a stand. We need to drive a message that is saying things cannot go on like this. We need to take a decisive stand and change the direction in which the country is taken. Now, if you look at the method, you'll recall that there was an independent panel in Parliament that said Mr. Ramaphosa may have committed wrongdoing. However, he was protected in Parliament. The Hawks was approached and the case was opened in June last year. Still, Mr. Ramaphosa was protected. On the issue of the CR17 bank statements, the court said Mr. Ramaphosa must not be transparent regarding who funds him. We went to the Office of the Public Protector. Again, there he received protection. Therefore, the only logical step that needed to be taken is to involve the citizens of the country, because we as parties are the representatives of the people. So it was important to demonstrate to the people that we've tried all of these other avenues in parliament, in court, Chapter 9 institutions, but this person is protected. However, you as a people, you need to take a stand. You need to correct this. Now, that is the reason why we as the ATM want to applaud the EFF for the peaceful march. We note that leading up to today, the media was abuzz about looting, about crime, vandalism, but none of that has happened, which clearly demonstrates that there was certain sections of society, including the government, that does not want us to focus on the issues that are raised. They want to deflect our attention to focus on a non-existent violence or looting which did not happen. That is why we as the ATM want to encourage people, look at the issues that are raised, particularly on the state of the country. And you as the citizens, let us take a stand and correct whatever that is happening in our country. And critical to that is that the citizens must rise. Tabo, what is important is that citizens must not be disengaged in the politics of our country, because whatever that happens in politics affects them personally. That is why a peaceful protest is one of the mechanisms of ensuring active citizenry and ensuring that citizens are engaged in the process of holding the executive and the government accountable.
All right, let's look then at what has happened on the lead up to this particular protest. Mdletshe, what is your sense on how the deployment of resources was carried out, right? Millions of rands used, UDM leader saying it was a waste of public funds. It was something that you would want to canvass and take the powers that be to task. The deployment of task forces, the deployment of the SANDF, was that justifiable when we look back at the day today and what took place?
No, thank you, Thabo. We must say that as the National Freedom Party, we were extremely disappointed at the manner in which government took over this thing. The fact of the matter is there was no need for our government to deploy so many soldiers on our streets. There was no need for the government to take some police who have retired, take them back to work today simply because government cannot afford to take responsibility of its action. The reality is the EFF had clearly demonstrated and indicated weeks before that this was going to be the most peaceful protest ever, and they did live up to that expectation. Therefore, we have wasted so many millions of rands for nothing. In fact, I think it would be proper if President Ramaphosa could be declared the enemy of the state. President Ramaphosa has proven beyond any reasonable doubt that he's the enemy of the people of this country. President Ramaphosa cannot, when the EFF is protesting over legitimate issues, then he goes all out and bring even retired police officers to come back and make sure that our streets are safe. It is clear that when people are killed in this country, President Ramaphosa doesn't care, because each time the Minister of Police comes out to announce those statistics each quarter, we know that the number of people that are killed in this country is going to increase. The number of women that are raped is increasing. Yeah. It means the state has got the capacity.
But Mdletshe, I want you to hold that thought. I want you to hold that thought for a second. Look at what people are saying who are watching us tonight on WhatsApp, 072-110-5584. This is what they are feeling. If people listen to what he said before the march, my personal observation is nothing near his utterances actually happened today. Look at the next one. It says, Mr. Zungula, I suspect the plan didn't work. Remember the July unrest, they fear being arrested for corruption. Ramaphosa's administration is busy arresting their friends. There are some people who believe it was peaceful because of the deployment of the forces. So the plan that could have led this country into some kind of destruction did not happen.
I totally disagree with those people, Thabo, for one reason. The EFF had committed themselves that the march was going to be peaceful, and indeed it was peaceful. Whether there were 3,400 SNDF members that were deployed, it was immaterial, because not a single member of the SNDF force can tell you that they had to use extreme measures to confront those who were protesting. The reality is that President Ramaphosa does as he pleases. If he feels that today he wants to deploy 3,400 soldiers on our streets, he does that. If he feels that today he is going to recall all those retired policemen to come back on our street, he just does that. The reality is that the state has got the capacity, but the only thing that is lacking is the political will from the president. That's why we are saying President Ramaphosa must be declared the enemy of the state. He must be declared the enemy of the people of this country.
Ganief, were the police on holiday? Was the law enforcement firm? Was the deployment and the resource worth it, justifiable?
Yes, I'd like to congratulate the president for taking no chances. When he met leaders of political parties on day 2 of the July 21st unrest, I told him, President, the country is not in safe hands. Don't listen to your Minister of Defense. Don't listen to the Minister of Intelligence, because they all made presentation. Don't listen to the Minister of Police. And only a handful of defense people were deployed. So I think he still remembers that, and that's why, over 3,000, which I still feel wasn't enough. He should have doubled it, because you can't take chances. However, where I disagree with the president is to deploy them for a whole month. He could just have deployed them for 3 days. Mopping up needs to take place now, and so on, and the country back to normal. So I think it was a very good decision. And the president of the country has an obligation that, to keep the country safe, and he has done that. And I think he must be commended for that.
There are some who believe he was sold false intelligence. They created this hullabaloo about nothing. It was never really going to be as hectic as all that.
Look, our intelligence forces, there is some improvement with the appointment of, the head of intelligence very recently. There is some permanent appointments, but our intelligence forces still don't make the cut to make the country safe. So I don't think the president even listened to what they had to say. He just made the decision that he's not going to take any chances. And I think it was a wise decision, but he was helped by the fact that one can trust the word of the commander-in-chief of the EFF, who said that it was going to be a peaceful protest, and his leaders will ensure that members of the party will be brought to book who disobeys the party's policy on this matter. Yeah. So I think it all worked well. The president was now given order that the defense force must go back to barracks. So that we don't, so there's no wasteful expense, unless he now wants to redeploy them to combat the criminal activity that takes place at all the power stations in Eskom. That will be a good thing if they are deployed at every power station, and they shoot to kill.
Back live with you tonight, Hendricks of Jama-ah, Canaan, Mdletshe of the NFP, as well as Vuyolwethu Zungula of ATM. And from the African Christian Democratic Party, we've got the Deputy President of the party, Wayne Thring. Wayne, let's bring you in here. There are some who would say, one, the limited resources which you were speaking about that already are not going to where they are supposed to be going were deployed to ensure the safety of the communities, pointing to the fact that this shutdown was really hitting hard on the resources deployed in such a manner. Others would say, well, the law enforcement in this country clearly comes down to political will, because when the president wills, he does send the police and they're able to protect the community. Was the deployment of resources justifiable?
Well, I think that the information that the ACDP has and that which was given to political parties was that the president received intelligence, and the intelligence that he received was that there is a threat, and as a result of this particular intelligence he was going to be deploying the South African Defence Force. I think the ACDP disagrees with the length of the period for which the Defence Force needed to be deployed. We do think that it was better for the President to err on the side of caution in deploying or getting the Defence Force to come and assist an already stretched South African police service. But I think that the period for which the Defence Force was to be deployed, for a period of 1 month, was unnecessary. The Defence Force, I think, also was not going to be deployed to protect communities. My understanding was that it was going to be at key areas, national key points, and to ensure that those particular national key points remain safe. I think the position of the ACDP was that yes, I think resources could have been better utilized. Recall that here in the Cape Flats at some stage we had the South African Defence Force being deployed to help the SAPs to deal with the crime and the drug peddling and there's so many deaths that took place as a result of gang violence within the Cape Flats. And I think that the resources could have been better used. That 1 month stretch is an overstretch, could have been better utilized to help combat crime within our communities, your communities of Wentworth, down in Durban. We get calls as members of parliament almost on the daily basis. Young people are being shot, young people are being killed. It's Wentworth, it's Umlazi, it's Kwamashu, it's Khayelitsha, it's here in the Cape Flats. And so the resources would certainly have been better spent over the prolonged period if they were allocated to areas where there really is a need.
Yeah. Dr. Zungula, you were on the front line with the police on holiday, where their hands full because of the protest action and the campaigning that was going on. Was that a well-spent, justifiable resource, taking no chances?
You know, Thabo, we need to ask ourselves a question. Why is it that when communities are terrorized by criminals, we don't see any political will from the government when it comes to deployment of police personnel? As we speak now, there's a community, Sikisiki, that is sleeping in the forest because of the crime levels in that particular community. There's no deployment there. We know in Hillbrow, in Sunnyside, there's hijacked buildings. We know in some areas there's communities terrorized by illegal miners. Absolutely no intervention. Seeing posts of how many vehicles have been hijacked that are shipped or that are driven to other countries. Still no government intervention. The only time government intervenes by bringing over 3,500 soldiers, it is when people are raising legitimate concerns about the state of the country. Because the issues that have been raised about load shedding, that is a legitimate concern. The issue about the state of the economy, the state of crime levels, the state of the decay of the infrastructure, it is legitimate concerns. Therefore, we've got a paranoid and a sick government that does not want people, to live happy lives, because they are more than happy as a government to allow criminals to terrorize our communities. But when people are raising their voice to the government to say, government, correct this, the government responds by deploying Amapolisa. Because what they're trying to send, they're trying to send a message that we are protected by the police, we are protected by the soldiers. Therefore, if you want to say anything to us as political parties or as the people, we've got this buffer or this layer of a security system, which is the police that are there to protect us as a government, which is clearly showing that this is an illegitimate government, because a government that is legitimate will never want to protect itself from the very same people that it supposes that it is there to serve. Because a caring government would have said, what are the issues raised by the people? How can we correct? How can we make things better? Not to respond by deploying police personnel. And if we are to look at the incidents of today, in Braamfontein, students were walking peacefully protesting, not carrying any dangerous weapons. They were shot at and they were arrested. Now, it clearly shows that the government does not want people to actually take a stand and correct whatever that is happening in our country. And we as the ATM, we've got a problem in that attitude of the government, because the government ought to be a servant of the people, ought to care about the people, ought to listen to the people when people are raising genuine concern.
Yeah, I literally have 4 minutes left, so I'm going to give you each a minute to tackle this one so that we wrap up the conversation in time. There's been a question around the tolerance of dissent and debate when it comes to, for example, the language of the police minister, the language of the police commissioner now in eThekwini, where the EFF is saying they're taking him to court, the language of cabinet when they did their briefing around this question of the shutdown. But Mdletshe, what do you make of that kind of language that came out of there? Almost others saying it was a language that sought to silence the debate and the dissent that was emerging around how the government is handling this question of load shedding, of poverty, of unemployment.
No, I think, Thabo, the type of language that is used by Police Minister Begicele, the Commissioner, and the KwaZulu-Natal Police Commissioner clearly demonstrate that they've got this instruction from someone high up to make sure that they silence any dissenting voice. And this is what we've got the issues with. We cannot claim to be a democratic state when people are not allowed to express their views, when people are not allowed to protest freely. Instead, police are threatening that. I even heard the Minister Begicele saying that they are going to bring as many vans as possible, and saying that our jails must be filled. And that was a clear demonstration, an indication that police were going to arrest people whether they protest peacefully or not. And we've got issues with that because our democracy must not have eyes. It must not be when people are raising genuine issues against the ruling party or against the government of the day, right, and police are used to threaten those people. And it's uncalled for. That's why we're saying completely out of time there.
I got to move. Ganief, your minute, what do you make of it? Police minister at some point said, we'll fill the jails if we have to. They'll see what they'll eat. But, of course, he kind of toned down that statement at some later stage.
Yeah, when the Defence Force withdrew their media statement, I thought there's a coup d'etat coming. However, what I want to say is that the Defence Force, the South African Police, the private security companies, a white monopoly capital, they actually tried to stop a revolution by the remarks that they made. And I don't think they have succeeded. The revolution that led to CODESA is the same revolutionary forces that are now taking shape in the country. And what has happened today, we're going to have many of such events. People call it different things like shutdown, they were calling other events. But the same revolutionary forces that led to CODESA is going to now flex its muscles in the run-up to the 2024 election.
Right. Wade, what do you think? Is there still space? You feel we have a healthy space for dissent and debate in the country without feeling that they'll shove some South African National Defence Force heavy on your shoulders if you speak otherwise of this government?
I think that the remarks of the minister, the police minister, was unfortunate. I think that the ACDP believes in a constitutional democracy. Within this constitutional democracy, you have a right to freedom of speech. You have the right to protest peacefully. And so for as long as your protest and your speech is in accordance with that and in alignment with the constitutional democracy, that needs to, as long as your protesting does not infringe on the rights of others, the ACDP would continue to fight for a constitutional democracy and for people to be able to protest peacefully, which is their constitutional right.
Yeah. Dr. Zungula, here's a question for you, final one as we wrap up. One would say you took part in the protest march. One thing for sure, when we wake up tomorrow, we are going to have load shedding again. It might have been stage one today because of the economic activity that was back down. It will get back up to where it was. But two, President Cyril Ramaphosa will still be the president of the country. So what have you achieved?
A message was sent, a message that South Africans are sick and tired of this failing government and they are prepared to take to the streets to express their frustration. A message was sent to make sure that in fact, to encourage all other South Africans who are not part of the peaceful protest today, that they need to come together and rescue the country, because we're talking about the future of the country here. The destruction of the lives and the livelihoods of South Africans is going to impact our children and our grandchildren. And lastly, this that happened yesterday, whereby the load shedding was down. There was no protest yesterday, but the load shedding was done nonetheless. When the police were deployed in huge numbers, it clearly shows that the resources are there. What is lacking is political will. Check how much our ministers in the security cluster get to be excited when there's going to be peaceful protest, whereas they are nowhere to be found when activists in KZN are shot and killed for fighting cross-border crimes, when 8 women are gang raped in Krugersdorp, when more than 20 people are killed in Soweto. So the message that people should see from this shutdown or from this peaceful protest is that we've got a government that lacks political will to resolve the issues. It is not a question of capacity or a question of resources, because the resources are there. It's just that abantu baphetheyo abafuni tu ukulungisa ingxaki zabantu.
Completely out of time. Gentlemen, appreciate your time. Thank you very much for coming on tonight. Canaan Mdletshe, Vuyolwethu Zungula, Ganief, Hendricks, as well as Wayne Fling of the ACDP.